Ladies and gentlemen, our special guest today on the Business Mind series is Mr. Paul Dupuis, who's the chairman and CEO Randstad Japan and author of the E5 movement, a global leader with a commendable track record in hands-on business growth and organizational transformational leadership. Paul Dupuis is currently the chairman and CEO of Randstad Japan. He exemplifies the spirit of agility and excellence in leadership in today's disruptive business landscape. His professional track record has been one of consistent and trailblazing achievements in the areas of business growth and development, turnaround and transformation, recruitment, strategic planning, talent management, innovation, and entrepreneurial excellence. Paul has over 25 years of professional experience in multiple countries across Asia, including Japan, where he's currently based, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, and India, where he spent a lot of time, and where a lot of you who are tuning into this conversation, this live stream right now, might recognize him on his photographs and his very popular posts on LinkedIn. He would be with his employees in the Siddhivinayak temple in Mumbai, and a very highly engaged and energetic team around him. Just to give you a sense of perspective for those who might not be aware, Randstad Global key figures for 2020 look something like this: more than 20 billion euros in revenue worldwide, 4,715 offices in 38 markets, more than 500,000 people employed every day. That's what Randstad is into. And prior to Paul's appointment as the CEO of Japan, he was the MD and CEO of Randstad India, where he drove the company to profitability. Paul is a game changer, a transformational leader. Under his leadership, Randstad India also did amazing work in being featured among some of the top places to work in the country, also on the Health and Emotional Wellness Index. He introduced several bold strategic initiatives, which we'll talk about today. He's a recognized thought leader in the HR services space, a frequent speaker in media and professional associations, as well as a regular columnist in Forbes and other leading publications across the world, and an expert on leadership, strategy, transformation, workforce planning, and hiring trends. He published his first book recently on leadership, which is called the E5 Movement. Stick with us. We'll talk about that too, and what takeaways leaders might have from that very important book. Paul is a passionate ice hockey player and a volunteer as a coach and supporter of ice hockey in remote parts of the Himalayas in northern India. Paul, you're welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Well, Simerjeet, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Greetings from Tokyo, and hello to friends in India and beyond.
Well, thank you for, across time zones agreeing to having this conversation. We are really grateful to have you here on the show today. Paul, you've led teams across borders, across countries, and successfully so, leaving behind your impact everywhere you were. I'd like to jump straight into this conversation to add value to our listeners. What are some of the few qualities that you feel that transcend borders and cultures and languages and different styles of working? What has worked for you over the years across these different countries, which you feel is immune to culture and time and language and borders?
It's a wonderful question, Simerjeet. And I must say that leading across borders has opened my eyes to the fact that effective, or let's say exceptional leadership, even one step further, game-changing leadership, is actually borderless and timeless. Oh, wow. When we study leaders right back to the beginning of time across genres, whether it's business or sports, politics, the arts, and so on, what you start to see is kind of some common denominators, almost like a common thread that connects these great leaders. And some of those things are that I discovered, certainly living in Japan and India and Singapore, some of the other places you mentioned. If you think about it, ultimately, what kind of leader would you follow? And I would ask everyone who's watching today that same question. What kind of leader would you follow? And I think the obvious answers are this: would you follow a leader who has your back in good times and in bad, no matter what? I think it's unanimous around the world that everyone would say yes. Would you follow a leader who's transparent in everything he or she does, open and honest? I think that crosses cultures. The answer would be yes. Sure. Or a leader who walks the talk, who says what he or she does and does what he or she says. I think these are basic rules of effective leadership. Now, these are some of the things that I've discovered, but I think also the other thing is about impact. you know, leaders have strengths and weaknesses, and some of the great leaders that I've observed and studied, very good at creating a vision, for example, but not so good at creating the movement to execute. And then you have the opposite. You have your pace setters who are all about execution, but maybe not so visionary.
Right.
So, you know, these are all skills that are really important to really be a truly game-changing leader.
Excellent insights there. And you say basic, you know, but often overlooked because I think somehow there's a huge misconception out there that great leadership is about finding the next big trend, you know, or finding the next big, you know, the groundbreaking research that might help you become a great leader. And in that process, in that quest for finding the some secret to leadership, we overlook the simple stuff which you mentioned. And as you rightly said, these things, whether it's transparency, whether it's trust, you talked about teams knowing that there's somebody who's got my back. And Google published a research, it was in the Harvard Business Review, asking, probing to figure out what are the reasons behind innovation at Google. And they found out psychological safety was one of the biggest factors there is to innovation. When you know that there's somebody out there, if I fail miserably at the innovation that I'm trying to achieve, there's somebody who's got my back. And that was number one factor. So thank you for those great insights. Now, Paul, having spent a lot of time here in India, and then I know your love for the Far East, your love for martial arts, and do you feel there are commonalities between these two ancient cultures here, India, where you spend a lot of time, and Japan, and especially when it comes to management practices or leadership ways? I'm sure there must be a lot of differences too. What can these two great ancient cultures learn from each other when it comes to a leadership or organizational development perspective?
Well, again, a wonderful question. And I would say, here's my disclaimer. I'm a huge fan of both Japan and India. Sure. So I will start by saying that because I do have a strong bias towards both. I think that Japan and India individually and then together are remarkable in their own ways. So let's talk about Japan for a moment. Sure. And I've been in Japan in and out for 31 years, so I know it relatively well. Japan is a land, and I'm sure you know this, Simerjeet, Japan's a land of meticulous focus on quality, on process. Of course, the word Kaizen was born from that, meticulous focus on process, constant improvement. We talk about that 1 degree of change and the compounded effect of 1 degree of change. That's Japan. Right. It's about slow and steady focus and never compromise on quality. Now, I popped over the pond to India and I parachuted into a world that I knew nothing about. And I arrived in India. I discovered...
and that was the first time? That was your first time ever.
Okay. Yeah, that was first time. And I arrived just after demonetization was announced.
Oh, interesting.
Right after long lines around the banks, around the corners. And of course, the word demonetization was not used anywhere else in the world. I think
it was the first, I believe. It was the first. The ATMs drying up. Yeah.
What an experience. But having said that, what you immediately see as a newcomer in India is energy, youth, speed, and then I discovered one of India's secret weapons, this thing called Jugaad.
Yes, we're very good at that.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because Jugaad is hotly debated. I've had lots of interesting conversations with leaders, you know, over a coffee or a drink in India, in my time in India. But in principle, I think it's how you define Jugaad. I quite like Jugaad, by the way. And the way I define Jugaad is simply ingenuity and creativity, leveraging your existing resources to execute, you know, to get something done. Right. And that spirit of experimentation, fueled by youth, curiosity, and speed, combined with what I just described in Japan, the meticulous focus on quality, on process, on 1 degree of improvement. If you were to marry those two, what an amazing combination. So I see a lot of similarities, on the other hand, between India and Japan. Both are very spiritual countries and cultures in their own way. I think both at the heart of the cultures puts people first. I find that both cultures are very caring about people and community. Right. And in many ways quite social. It's shown in different ways. In India, as soon as the music comes on, everyone dances. Yeah. You know, in Japan, it's done in a different way. Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
And you know, being from Punjab, you know.
Oh, that. Of course, yeah. Punjabis, we love our music, and and the world loves it too. So I've heard that the world loves it too, the Bhangra music. Yeah.
It's gone. It's gone viral. So yeah. So I would say there are some clear differences in the way the culture is expressed. But when I come back to what I said earlier, the combination of the good stuff from Japan with India would be absolutely remarkable. And actually, that's one of my missions now, having lived and worked in both countries and both cultures, to really bring both of those together when I lead.
Oh, definitely. That's a great input there, and I think everybody who's listening, tuning in right now, needs to reflect on this. That it has been limitations have been one of our greatest strengths in the fact that since we sometimes did not have access historically to all of the things that the rest of the world did, we leapfrogged in terms of development. I'm reminded of this development in the mobile phone industry. We went from a lot of homes having no phones at all. So we didn't go from no phones to landlines to mobile phones. We skipped the landlines altogether in hundreds of millions of homes, and then onwards to smartphone penetration, and I think that's fueling entirely a new growth story. Quick question there: if I were to ask you for your next 6 months, whether it's with your experience in India, for India or Japan, do the next 6 months look better than the last 6 months?
Oh, absolutely. And there's my answer is based on two things. And every leader should, I believe, express opinions based on two things. One, data, objective, quantifiable data. Two, gut feeling.
Right.
I absolutely believe that the combination of those two are very important. By the way, the leader's gut feeling is something that's built up over time. A seasoned leader, a seasoned veteran learns from mistakes.
And the gut is digesting a lot of data already and a lot of information already. So it's a well-informed gut feeling, based on what's going on. So thank you. I think we all need to be optimistic that there's a major recovery across the corner, and we just need to be ready for it with that positive outlook. Paul, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into your time in India and the transformation that you led for Randstad India. Under your leadership, Randstad India ranked a great place to work twice in a row, and also ranked in India's top 10 list of best workplaces in health and wellness, an area which is often overlooked in the pursuit of higher profits and so many other business objectives. Would you please talk to us about your secrets of your favorite tools when it comes to transformational leadership, because it's hard work, having people experiment with something new, and also for especially folks on LinkedIn who might be tuning into this conversation right now. I'm sure it's on their horizon, it's on their radar. Employee well-being, emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, they've heard about it, but somehow we're not very good at executing it, making it happen. What would your top tips be to leaders on that?
Well, there's two key themes there, Simerjeet. Let's talk about the first one, transformation. Sure. Transformation. It's interesting. Transformation, I think when most of us hear that word, we think of something that's relatively quick. We almost think about it as remarkable change that happens quickly. But that's actually not quite right. Transformation, if you think about it like this, think about it like getting in shape. I'm sure you've probably, you start off your new year sometimes, Simerjeet?
I lose the same 5 kilos every year. I gain them back again.
I'm going to lose these 5 kilos. I'm going to get ripped. I'm going to be in great shape. And I'll be
dreams.
I'll be like Shah Rukh Khan, and I'll be the star. And that's great. Having those intentions is very important. And by the way, we get there when we do the right thing every single day.
Right.
And then over a period of time, I talked about incremental change and incremental improvement. Over a period of time, after doing the right thing consistently and relentlessly and persistently, the transformation comes about. But it doesn't happen overnight. And any band, like for example, I talk about it in my book, the Beatles, they were often described as being successful overnight. There's no such thing as overnight success in any genre. We all know that. Right?
True.
Nobody talks about all the years they played in the basements in bars in Germany and so on.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's the same thing with professional athletes, same thing with leaders. So transformation of an organization is about small steps and degrees of change every single day. I would frame it in a simple mantra, or let's call it a hashtag, better than yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Better than
yesterday. We love that.
If we honor this spirit of better than yesterday every day, you see what happens. Better than yesterday, that 1 degree of change. If we can be a bit better than yesterday every day. And that's really what I aim to bring to India when I arrived. Now, for context, Randstad India was deep in the red for 8 years. We never made a profit. We were struggling. The ship was rocking. I would say the ship was on the verge of sinking. I was sent over, you could say turnaround, but I was sent over to ignite transformation, not just lead it, because not one person can really drive and execute on transformation.
Sure.
It has to be a movement.
Needs a team, right?
It's always about a movement, and it's a gradual process. So the good news is that the first step was getting people to believe that we could, in fact, transform from being a lagger to a leader.
Sure.
And that was the first challenge, and was able to do that. And we saw, the belief, absolutely. And you saw that evidence in a whole bunch of things. Of course, the metrics, the outputs of the business. But for me, I'm quite proud of what you mentioned earlier. The Great Place to Work Institute is extremely tough when they go through their process. We didn't make the cut a couple of years, and that just fueled our fire even more. And then we did. And not only that, we came to be, as you said, one of the top 10. Particularly in health and wellness. And I'd like to comment on that second topic, which is around health and wellness. I was in India during the worst time of COVID. Of course, pre-COVID, when I was traveling the country and visiting colleagues across the four corners of this amazing country, we had big plans for 2020, of course, but nobody predicted what was to follow. Sure. And it was a very, very tough time. And I was there again at the worst of the worst times. And one of the things we discovered along the way is that when you talk about health, previously, we always talked about physical health. We defaulted to physical health. Let's stay healthy. And then we realized the importance of mental health. And this is so important for leaders. If you think about it in terms, let's be that pro athlete for a moment. To perform at a high level, Sachin Tendulkar did not perform for so many years by not taking care of himself. He took care of himself. He took care of his body, and he also took care of his mind. And professional athletes are very aware of the importance of having a sound mind and a sound body to perform at a high level. I think leadership is exactly the same. And that was one of the important lessons I learned, especially in India during COVID, the importance of the leader to take care of mental health and therefore bring that into the culture of the organization, to talk about mental health, to be open, to be human with your colleagues.
Make it a priority, yes. No, well said. Unless you're living the message yourself, unless you're practicing it and reorienting the culture and the priorities of the organization to follow through, it'll just remain wishful thinking. I often use the analogy, Paul, of an empty gas engine, gas tank or petrol tank on your car. And I say to leaders, it's like, imagine if your fuel tank is on empty, you cannot contribute anything, even if it's a Mercedes or a Ferrari parked in your garage. Hey, empty tanks and empty minds, and empty minds are useful sometimes when you want to learn more information. But if you're low on energy yourself,
fresh minds, that's for sure.
But if you're low on energy and enthusiasm, and if you cannot believe that it can be done, there's very little chance that you can infect other people with that energy. So I think it's important, as you rightly said, for leaders to ensure to put their own well-being top of the list as well, and then to drive this message across the organization.
Absolutely. Let me add one thing, Simerjeet.
Please.
This is really important. Another observation. And by the way, I read Sachin Tendulkar's biography. I watched the movie and so on, Sachin. It's a very interesting story. I've seen that with being a Canadian ice hockey player. So Wayne Gretzky is our Sachin Tendulkar.
Of course. I love Wayne.
Baseball
I love his motivational quotes.
Oh, yeah. In baseball in Japan, it's Ichiro, who went to Seattle and played, and he's a superstar. If you look at high performers in sports, in politics, the arts, business, just keep going in everything. What you see is these high performers found their zone. Some people call it the flow, but it's a zone. And that zone is like a sweet spot. It's how you live your life. It's how you take care of yourself physically and mentally. You don't get too high, you don't get too low. And every professional, regardless, again, of the arena they compete in, including leaders, we have good days and bad days. The key is to not let yourself get too high when it's good and too low when it's bad, and staying in that zone and protecting that sweet spot, that healthy cadence, that zone at all costs. I think it's so important for a leader to do that.
I love the concept of the zone, and I've studied a little about flow from Professor Mihai Csikszentmihalyi about this whole concept. And I think though it takes a while somehow to get there, but it's worthwhile being there, managing the highs and lows. I've experienced it personally myself, Paul, because, when you have an event, let's say a keynote to a large audience, it's a huge rush of hormones, right? You're in front of a huge audience. It's all, let's go conquer the world. You've got these people going with you. And then the flight back home, and all of a sudden it'll be like return to normalcy sort of thing, which would make me nervous. And on a personal note, what I learned to do over the years was to find ways to mitigate that valley to use it for rest, recuperation, as well as for, to explore other dimensions which will help me strike balance. These conversations around the Beginner's Mind series emerge from that reflection. What do I do when I'm not on stage in order to keep myself still aligned with what I do, not out of touch, but at the same time to learn how to navigate these valleys? I think it was Winston Churchill who talked about, he said, it's the peaks that inspire leaders, and it's the valleys that mature us. And I think striking the right balance, as you rightly said, is really important. So thank you for that.
Well, there's a Japanese proverb I'll share with you as well, which directly translated says that as the rain falls, the roots grow stronger.
Wow. I love that.
So you got to get through the tough times to get to the good times. And
as
in order
the rain
to build
falls,
resiliency and grit, as the rain falls, the roots grow stronger.
Absolutely. Well, that's very
That's
powerful.
the direct translation. And I absolutely believe that in order to build resilience and grit, and we've talked a lot about that, especially over the past year and a half, as a key leadership quality and competency, you have to go through those tough days. You got to go through the rainy days. You got to experience those lows. And those become stories as well. And that's one other element I would add is effective leadership. The best leaders I've been around, they're good storytellers. It's not about being great at putting words together into story. They're great storytellers because they share their personal stories. They're not afraid to share their personal stories, and people connect with stories. Yeah.
Oh, indeed. Especially, as you rightly said, when they're coming from direct first-hand experience. It helps you build your credibility with these people. You're not talking theoretically or academically, some far-fetched bookish idea. It's a life you've lived. I love that. When the rain falls, the roots become stronger. There's a lot of wisdom in Zen philosophy too. Thank you for sharing that. I heard while you were in India, you had a Guinness World Record. Tell us more about it, please. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. Growing up as a kid in Canada, playing ice hockey is like my religion, very similar to cricket in India. I never imagined, first of all, that I would go to India and play ice hockey. Discovered this place called Ladakh, which I had never heard of. I was even living in India for a while. I never knew of Ladakh. And I got a call from the Canadian consulate in Mumbai, and they said, hey, we're going to be hosting a Canada Indo-friendly ice hockey tournament up in Leh, Ladakh. So I had to look at the map to see what is this. And then
where is this place?
In India, and play hockey in the winter, of course. So, of course, I flew up and I played, and I discovered what I think is heaven on earth, Ladakh. It's just a beautiful part of the world. And so went up there and I connected with people from all over the world who come in for this, and then also hooked up with an NPO called the Hockey Foundation, which is really about using sport, hockey, as a vehicle to build community, to build life skills, to promote positive change. Because we know sport can do that, right? And so So then they had this great idea to make a Guinness World Record attempt at playing the highest elevation ice hockey game ever in the world. And they wanted to do it in Ladakh. So there's quite a long story about it all came to be, but I was involved with planning and organizing this game. And it was at 4,300 meters, high up in Ladakh.
And you made it happen. So that deserves
World Record. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you. And I now travel to Ladakh every January, although this coming up would be tough because of COVID and travel restrictions. But I've made a commitment to my friends in Ladakh, to the local community, volunteering with schools. We're close to Sonam Wanchak at Sekmo, of course, school.
Oh, he's doing amazing work, Sonam, there in Ladakh.
He's a good friend of mine, and we visit the school and coach the students and donate and equipment and so on. So I will. In fact, I've even told my wife that one day, if I ever retire, I don't know, it's such a foreign concept, frankly, but I would like to take a month every year, and that would be January, by the way, minus 25 degrees. I want to go to Ladakh, spend my time coaching ice hockey and volunteering in Ladakh every year.
I love the fact that you've physically not in the country anymore, but a part of your heart is still connected to the achievement in Ladakh and the folks in Ladakh, and the fact that you want to come back here. And I just take a moment here to share with the audience also that I saw a couple of your photographs, Paul, with celebrating a lot of Indian festivals with your team members in the temple. And it appeared so natural you were not doing it. It appeared really natural. You looked one among them, and everybody looked so engaged and connected. I usually joke about this, and research confirms that you can look at how connected a well-knitted team is just by the body language of the team members, and how when they're conversing with each other, you can tell a lot about the harmony. And I think that's a great message there for everyone who's working in a different country, in a foreign land, is to just go out and experience it. And I'm sure it's going to leave an impact on you in more ways than you can imagine. And I'm sure you're a testimony to that as well, Paul.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Of course, wherever I've lived, I believe that if we go somewhere, we should dive right in and learn about the local culture. And it's a great way to build relationships, of course, too. Definitely. And India was a lot of opportunities in India to do that. And I was very fortunate because, we have locations across the entire country. So when I arrived in Chennai, then it was, Vanakkam, Nandi, Chennai. And when I arrived in Kolkata, it was Namaskar, Kemo, and I got to eat the beautiful sweets of Kolkata.
The Bengali sweets,
Oh my gosh, yeah. And everywhere I traveled. And so I genuinely enjoyed that element of living in India. The culture is just incredible. All the puja that we did, and just incredible. Yeah.
So glad that you did, because a lot of us prefer to be in our predictable bubble. We like to. I went to Bahrain long back for a leadership to deliver a leadership workshop there, and my host asked me, "Would you like to go to this Italian restaurant or this?" All the international names. I said, "Well, I'm sure the pizza here is going to taste just like everywhere else on the planet. Why don't we go to a genuine Arabic Bahraini place?" And that's what we did. We sat down on the floor. There's this huge platter of rice that came, and we ate with our hands, and it was he enjoyed it, I loved it, and we were still great friends, and so it really helps if we take the risk of stepping outside of our bubble. Thanks for sharing those personal anecdotes, Paul. The next thing I wanted to talk about is this headlines across the world and leading publications about the Great Resignation, right? Please tell us what's going on. People don't want to go back to work or to the normal anymore, to the old normal. Is this overhyped, or should global leaders pay attention to this phenomenon?
Well, let's go back to my algorithm. When we talk about making decisions, we start with the data. We always start with data.
Sure.
What we're seeing in the media is a bit of hype, as you said, Simerjeet. I think the Great Resignation as a term, as a concept, has attracted a lot of attention. When we look at the data, however, and I would say Randstad would be one of the world authorities when it comes to people finding jobs, getting jobs, and leaving jobs.
Well, you're putting more than 500,000 people to work every day.
We're number one in the world in what we do. So I can tell you with confidence that the data shows that net, there are more jobs being created. In other words, there are more people starting new jobs than there are people leaving jobs.
Interesting.
So actually, while we see in the media the Great Resignation, there's one thing that's been ignored. There's the great hiring that's happening. And it's literally happening right now as we speak. Certainly, India is a great example of that.
Right.
The bounce back in India right now on the hiring front is off the charts, way better than 2019 pre-COVID.
Okay.
And again,
good. We are so happy to hear that.
Oh, it's absolutely true. And we want to keep it going. Of course, we'll do our best to do that. But let me say this though: there is proportionally there is a higher percentage of people, or raw number of people, leaving jobs than we would have seen in the past. And this is an indication of something, I think, which is a bit different. What it comes down to is that companies that are going to be future ready, ready for this new world of work, need to be flexible on the way they work, on the expectations for people. And this is one thing where I think a lot of companies are struggling right now, particularly traditional companies. And I saw it in India. I certainly see it in Japan, the older promoter-led companies, or the older, more traditional, let's say analog companies with traditional culture. They have this thing that I would call presenteeism. It's the opposite of absenteeism, right? So presenteeism is this idea that you need to show up physically in order to do work. And there's still organizations that believe it. There are still leaders that believe that. And because of what happened with COVID, a lot of people have been awakened to the fact that actually they can be productive and effective sitting in their home or sitting in a remote location. They don't necessarily need to, navigate traffic
Sure.
and go to an office. And
Right.
so this is where the dilemma is for a lot of companies. So actually, a lot of people are leaving simply because of that fact. They like the
Right.
job, but they don't like the fact that the company is asking or mandating them to come to the office. And so that ability to work in a hybrid way, in a way where you get to choose
Yep.
how and where you work, is going to be a defining factor for organizations to be future ready.
So what you're saying in essence is that leaders need to reinvent the way they look at work, not only the way they're currently working, but how they look at it in, a couple of years down the lane. So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into two aspects of this when you use the term future ready. So how do leaders need to change themselves? That's one of my first questions. Well, I mean, what should be a senior leader? Because we got to appreciate the fact these folks have spent years and years of careful, judicious behavior in order to be where they are. We suddenly cannot expect them to take major risks, right? They've learned to sort of protect the status quo. And now there's this huge change that's around the horizon. So from two aspects, I'd love to hear your views. One is the individual. How do leaders need to, what sort of new practices or mindsets they should be adopting? And then second is organizational. What should they be promoting at the workplace in order to reorient and make themselves competitive and sort of valid in this new world?
So let's start with the behavior of the leader.
Sure.
And again, in my book, I talk about my observations. The best leaders, the game-changing leaders, the ones who really created movements, they displayed exceptional behavior. So exceptional leadership is about showing exceptional behavior. So
Agreed.
if we talk about being future ready, it means that the leader needs to walk the talk.
Right.
When we talk about a hybrid way of working, well, the leader needs to actually work in a hybrid way. And so the strongest message a leader can send out when we start talking about embracing this notion of fluid work and hybrid work is for the leader to sit in his or her home or at a remote location. In my case, I would really like to be up in Ladakh right now talking to you as I lead Japan. Wouldn't that be something? Huh?
Sure.
And it is possible, by the way. It is absolutely possible. So the best way to encourage a behavior is to display it yourself as a leader. So that's one thing.
Okay.
To say that we embrace this idea of fluid work, but then to expect people to come into the office and yourself being in the office every single day is kind of contradictory.
It is.
So, and back to presenteeism, the bias that can come with that, spotlighting people who come versus those who work remotely. So it's going to be a challenge for a lot of leaders. I also would say that you mentioned something which is I'm very passionate about, the beginner's mind.
Right.
I'll take it into the martial arts framework, being a
Please.
guy who's done martial arts for many years. The black belt is considered the first step towards mastery, right? You get your first degree and then your journey is kind of on your way. But to get there, you start at white belt. That's the form of purity. That's the beginner's mind. In Japanese, it's called shoshin.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And I absolutely believe that leaders right now need to take off the black belt that they work so hard to earn, as you just said, and put on the white belt. And relearn, because we're moving into a new world.
Now that's a great way to put it. Thank you. Is to what I usually also when you talk about the beginner's mind, and I've talked this in the context of innovation, is and this what you said resonates with that, is don't allow your previous success or failure or experience for that matter to imprison you. You got to, as you said, take off the black belt of experience, of accomplishment, of achievements, and put on the white belt of purity, which in the Shoshin means I'm ready to begin again. And I can so very well relate with that. When the COVID thing hit and the lockdowns happened, I had my last big presentation in Hyderabad, Paul, in the Ramoji Film City. The universe has a sense of humor. I had 3,000 people in front of me before everything was going to shut down. And then we had to reinvent with this whole virtual studio, with this HD streaming. And I, in effect, became my own audio-visual technician. We learned more about sound and acoustics and lighting and cameras and streaming software than I would have ever done in the last 20 years. And it's been so rewarding. It was tough at the time, but it's been so rewarding in the long run.
Well, and I hope you don't mind if I share with the audience that
Please.
You and I had a conversation before we went live today, because I asked you about this story and the technology.
Right.
You have reinvented yourself. And by the way, I think you've undergone a transformation, which didn't happen overnight.
Right.
It was a learning process, and it was trial and error, and you're doing a fine job. So congrats to you for, for ensuring that you're future ready.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it was, and what we discovered was when your survival is at stake, you suddenly become a lot more innovative than you would otherwise. Yes, fear was one option, saying that, hey, everything is ruined and it's all finished and what are we going to do now? Let's wait for circumstances to change. We made the other choice, and we're glad that we did. Paul, in terms of the key skills from the workforce, I'm sure they also need to adapt and change. It's not just cultures, it's not just organization and leaders. Especially to India has a huge young population waiting to enter the workforce. Now, some trends, some studies are not very encouraging as far as the STEM subjects are concerned in terms of their readiness for global markets, in terms of what our institutes are churning out at the moment. So there's a huge gap between the expectations of the companies, of the organizations, and what our educational institutes are churning out at the moment. But at the same time, I'm sure there's mindset gaps also that they need to cover. Would you like to share your views on that, not just in India, from a global perspective of developing and developed economies, young people entering the workforce? Do they need to think and act differently? And if yes, what?
Yeah, so let me comment from a macro view, and then I'll kind of laser in on India. First of all, from a global perspective, there are some things that are universal right now. There is scarcity around the world on certain skill sets, let's say the latest needed talent. And if we talk in the world of IT, just as an example, we've heard about RPA and AI and cloud, machine learning, and so on. All of that is no longer cutting edge or leading edge. It's now, it's happening right now. It's not new.
Mainstream now.
Go back 5 years, it was data science. Well, now data scientists are everywhere, of course. So having the ability to quickly learn, to learn, we'll call that the agility, learning agility, is an absolute important muscle to possess for someone navigating into the future, into this new world of work. So that would be one piece of advice. Always
that'd be number one, agility to learn. Okay.
Learning agility is a critical element. I think it's more important than the school you went to yesterday is the school you're going to go to tomorrow. And the school doesn't need to be a formal school.
Right.
So this is very important. If you look around the world, we see that in the 38 countries where we operate, there is talent scarcity. You might think, well, hang on a second. India, Indonesia, even China to a certain degree, countries that are growing in population, and in India's case, a younger and younger population. The average age is arguably 29 right now. 13 million people enter the formal workforce every year in India. So what we're talking about, OECD says 19 to 59 is the formal workforce, right? So they enter into the workforce. So every year you have 13 million people coming into that zone and entering the formal workforce.
Right.
It's massive. Where are the jobs? And this is where I think the challenge is, as you said, and you hit it right on that note, is the gap between what schools are providing and what companies need, what the real world needs. And I saw that myself firsthand in India, again, particularly, let's say, in the IT space, but not only limited to that. And I heard that from both sides. I heard it from the job seekers who are having a hard time finding a role when they came out of their schools thinking, I'm well prepared. And from the companies who were hiring, saying, well, these young folks don't have what we need. And I have to say, I'm a big fan of the notion and Prime Minister Modi's idea of skill India, make in India. I think skilling is a key word. How the government is going about it is a different conversation. But the point is, we need to take the responsibility to skill the workforce of the future. And I think this needs to be kind of a triangle relationship. It should be the schools, so the government, it should be the hiring companies, but it also should be the individual job seeker themselves, someone who's navigating the career. That triangle is very important. I think that's actually a secret for India to really become a leading economic power in the future. If we talk about skilling, but then making in India and exporting to the world, that's the opportunity right there. That triangle needs to be, I think, more robust than it is right now.
I love that. So the triangle is the job seeker herself, And then
Yeah.
the organizations which are hiring, they need to jump in more in terms of, not just be ready to hire, but also participate in the ecosystem to ensure that they're stakeholders, because these are the people that they're going to hire tomorrow. And the institutions, the educational institutions, I think radically need to reinvent their approach, because we're preparing for a new era, and we're still stuck in the old industrial age mindset. And that's true not just for India, other parts of the world as well. Where I think if right now we need a major revolution, of course we need it in the way we work, in the business world, but also in the education world, because we end up blocking someone in an institute, locking them in for several years, and then insisting that they cut off outside learning, because we figured it out in the curriculum, so we know it best for what's best for you, and then exposing them all of a sudden to a world which has radically changed over a course of 6 months or 7 months. So I like that analogy of the triangle, and especially I think job seekers have a huge role to play. The message is loud and clear, guys. Take charge of your career, take charge of your lives, design your own curriculum. I always suggest to people to think of themselves as a one-person company who's today offering your services to enterprise XYZ, or tomorrow to another company. Think of yourself as an enterprise, set apart learning and development budget, go attend those workshops, online learning. There's so many. We have more information available than our grandparents did in their entire lifetimes. We have it in a single day. So now it's up to us. We need to, rise to the opportunity. So you've talked about future-proofing careers in a dynamic world. Is about agility to learn was your number one, and I love that, because things are changing every day. And also, I love the concept of the white belt, wearing the white belt every now and then, starting as a beginner. Talk to us about your book, Paul, and the movement associated with it, the E5 movement, and your book. And what are the top principles you feel are relevant right now in the current times?
Sure. Well, thank you. So the book is, it's just behind me here. The book was actually inspired in part by my time in India, but certainly in Japan and Singapore, even growing up playing ice hockey in my backyard rink in my home.
So which state would it, which province would it be from Canada?
I'm from Ontario. I'm from Windsor, Ontario. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So my dad, and I'd write about it in the book, but my dad every winter would go out and build an ice rink in our backyard. And he would brave the cold, -10, -20 degrees, mornings and nights, flooding the rink for us, creating this beautiful ice rink. And that's where we spent a lot of our, let's say, time when we were not in school. We were on the rink. We even had lights outside, so at the night we could play. And our friends would come over. Our place was sort of the neighborhood playground, if you will, in the winter. But that's also where I learned some important life lessons. There are lessons I learned when I was 4 or 5 years old on that ice rink in the backyard that I use even today. Things about the importance of falling down and getting back up, the importance of teamwork, the importance of playing a role, sometimes as defender, sometimes as attackers. Sport teaches you a lot of those things.
It does.
And a wonderful experience. But, and along the way, my journey, I've had a number of opportunities to be a leader, whether it was in school. I was a student council president of my high school. I found myself in different leadership roles naturally. And what I started to observe is that leadership is, first of all, it's something that can be learned. We hear this notion of the born leader, and I don't buy it. I actually believe that every single person, whether you're going to lead people or lead by example, every one of us can make the choice to be a leader.
Sure.
But as Arnold Schwarzenegger said, you don't just get in shape by walking in the gym. Walking in the gym is not enough. You got to walk in and you got to do the work.
Absolutely.
You got to do the work. And even better if you focus.
Yeah, keep that phone aside.
and you focus on the specific muscle you want to build. I think leadership is the same. It's a series of muscles that need to be built with purpose, and you got to do the work. How do you do the work? You practice. And so along my journey, I started to discover what, for me personally, my version of leadership, I'll call it my ism, if you will, that and it's built on the back of other notions of leadership. Certainly leadership, I believe, is an open source code. Nobody owns and copyrights any idea around leadership. We all share it and we trade it. We learn from each other. Isaac Newton said, we see further when we stand on the shoulders of giants.
Of giants, indeed, yes.
And it's so true with leadership. So I was in India, and actually I was studying in London Business School, and I had a coach in this program. It was on transformational leadership. And he said, hey, Paul, tell me about your ideas about leadership. And I thought, okay. So I started talking. I think I went on for about 15 minutes, and he said, stop. You've got to write a book.
Nice.
I'd never heard those words before from anyone. I'm not an author. I don't write. And then a few months later, a good friend who's also a best-selling author here in Japan, his name is Ken Honda. He also said, Paul, you need to write a book. And a couple more people said it to me, and I thought a bit of serendipity, or maybe this is, there's a meaning here. So I started to write the book. I wrote it in Bangor, and it's based on, as I said earlier, kind of my version of leadership based on other approaches to leadership I've learned about. It's called the E5 movement. And the E5 is about 5 E's. If you like, Simerjeet, I'll walk you through it real briefly.
Yes, please. Would love to.
Okay. So the first E is about envision. Crafting a compelling vision that touches both the hearts and the minds. And this is where a lot of leaders struggle, by the way. It's the most important step to becoming a game-changing leader. And where a lot of leaders struggle, and I'm guilty of it, when I was a leader in my 20s and 30s, you immediately default to the what, or the how much, or the how many, target, the goal, and it's often numerical, right? That's not strategy, and that's not visionary. That's actually tactical. That's output. Output. So it's about the why. It's about purpose. But how are we going to change the world? So the vision begins with that. It has to touch the hearts and the minds. So let's imagine you've crafted a compelling vision. It touches the hearts and minds. You got the why right. The first moment of truth comes when you open up your door from your cave and you go outside to tell the world. And this is something you would be very good at. There's this thing called omnichannel. We use the omnichannel to connect with people, to touch their hearts and minds, different ways to communicate, right?
Sure.
Amazon says it takes 7 times, the rule of 7 times to touch somebody before they buy. It's the same thing with a vision. You have to touch people through town halls, through webinars, through blogs, through a chat at the coffee machine or at the chai stand or whatever it is. All of these different mediums then help you kind of convey your vision. Now let's imagine you've done that well. And now people start to lean in and they start to say, how can I be part of it? Well, that's the excite stage. That's the third E.
So it's when you're transferring the energy to others and they're curious, they want to be a part of it.
They're digesting it. And not only that, they're leaning in and they're standing up and they want to be part of it.
Nice.
That's a moment of truth, because that's when the leader can shift to the fourth E, which I would say is where I'm at in my journey as a leader. And that is to be leader as enabler, to enable. And enable means to create an environment where everyone can be the best version of themselves, where everyone can shine. You create an environment, you give them the tools, whether it's technology or know-how, training, whatever it is. You give them the right degree of push, pull, cheering from the side, leading from the front. And one more thing, getting out of the way, just getting out of the way. Because one of the best things a leader can do sometimes is just step out of the way. Let the team go. Let them experiment. Let them fall down.
So that's the enabling part.
That's the enabling one. And the fifth one is the ultimate measurement of the exceptional leader. And this will be true, I believe, until the very end of time. And that is to execute. That means bring that vision to life for measurable impact.
Yeah. Did we miss the fourth part? So it was envision, excite, enable.
Envision, express.
Express. Okay. Right. The go and share with the others. Okay. The omnichannel. Okay.
Excite, generate excitement. Enable.
And
then execute.
And execute. Right. And that, I think, is a wonderful framework right there. Rightly so, starting with envisioning, because that's where some of us, we miss out on that because we're so caught up in the current reality, the current challenges, that we're not able to step aside from that and dream. It's envisioning is this process of letting your imagination go wild and say, hey, what could be the possibilities on the horizon. So envisioning, begin with that, and then move on to expressing it. That was your second E, and then get other people excited. This is where your communication skills, your ability to articulate your idea, to use digital tools come in. And then is to enable them. I love the concept of the leader getting out of the way and then executing it, which is seeing it through. And Paul, I love that because a lot of times major initiatives, they start with a lot of excitement, just like New Year resolutions, which I'm sure are around the corner for many people across the world. And then it slowly fizzles out mid-January because we don't see things through. So execution to see through all the way to the end. It's been a wonderful conversation here. You've packed so much information, wisdom, and inspiration in the last 48 minutes. I really thoroughly enjoyed being here with you and interacting. Any parting words of wisdom for the audience before we say bye for today?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Simerjeet, for what you're doing. You're, in a way, building your own movement, and I've been following you, and it's great to finally have this conversation with you.
Thank you.
I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think, I have a few mantras that I've picked up along the way, and you can call them guiding principles or whatever they are, but I think mantras should be positive reaffirmations. And here's another one. Honor the past, focus on the future. Wow. Honor the past, focus on the future. It's so important that we don't let the past weigh us down. And, it's interesting because stress, especially right now we talk about mental health, stress often comes from yesterday, not from tomorrow.
Right.
So it's so important that we don't ignore the past. We should learn from it. But when we learn from it, turn around and face what's next. Because I think that's really where we make the biggest impact. So let's honor the past, focus on the future. I think the other one, we said it earlier, and I would remind everyone the importance of learning. There's only one species on this planet that can wake up in the morning and decide to go and learn a new language or learn how to play a musical instrument or get a certification in the latest IT or technology. Yep. That's the human beings. And we have
go play ice hockey in Ladakh.
You're right. To go see the place, to launch your series as you've done, to learn the technology around it, to transform. So, I think we really need to leverage that amazing quality we have as human beings to learn. Always be learning. Put that white belt on every morning and take it one day and one cup at a time of knowledge.
I am sure a lot of the people who are especially in leadership positions right now will value a lot from will gain a lot from what you said. And I especially love the last part, honor the past and be excited for the future, which is as we stand on the cusp of, closing this very horrible, very heavy chapter of the COVID-19. People suffered personally. They lost friends and family. The way we worked was changed. There was a lot of uncertainty, and look forward with enthusiasm and joy towards the future. The month of January, in fact, it is named after the Greek god called Janus, and Janus has two faces in the Greek mythology. One is the wiser, older face, looking towards the past, learning from the past, absorbing all the lessons, and then a younger, brighter, younger face, enthusiastic face, looking towards the future. So we need to make peace with this and integrate the lessons from the past of what might have happened to us. It all happens for a reason. What are the lessons there? And then not let this weigh us down, and then look forward with positivity, hope, and enthusiasm.
Wonderful image. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Paul.
I'm going to use that with my team as well as we go into countdown mode to the end of this year. And it's been in many ways a year of bounce back for all of us, hasn't it? We're coming around a corner. But of course, we need to keep our guard up. So if I could remind everyone, I think it's very important that we all continue to stay safe. To stay safe. It's so important. Take care of ourselves and our loved ones. Take care of yourself physically and also mentally. And stay
Absolutely.
positive.
Wear those masks and get those vaccines, guys. And thank you so much for tuning into this conversation. Mr. Paul Dupuis, huge round of applause for you. And thank you.
Thank you.
A big virtual hug. And we really appreciate the time here that you spend with us. Thank you once again.
Thank you again. And all the best to everybody in India and beyond. Thank you.
Cheers.